Good morning, Charles. Nice to see you. I hope you're fine.
I am. Nice talking with you as well.
For me too. Charles, in November we have had a conference in Lower Saxony to the topic ESD. And you, Charles, have kindly contributed a video here. Thank you for the part of you. It was very interesting, and our participants, they already have many questions, and I have brought the questions here to our meeting for the interview. My name is Daniela Petruschke, and I'm glad to be with you here. So it's all right when we will start?
Right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Charles, do you want to say a little bit of you and your chair?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yes, my name is Charles Hopkins, and I'm a professor at York University in Toronto, Canada. And I hold a UNESCO Chair on reorienting education towards sustainability. It was the first chair of its kind in the world, actually. It goes back to 1999. But things are progressing now all around the world.
Charles, my first question. Where does ESD stand today?
Yes, well, as I mentioned, a chair goes back to 1999. But of course, that was sort of the beginnings of looking at reorienting education systems. Now it is becoming much more in mainstream education around the world. It has been education for sustainable development has been recognized 4 separate times at the UN as the key enabler of implementing all the sustainable development goals. And so it has become a sort of a crucial element of K through 12 schools, elementary, secondary, but also in higher education, in universities and so on, where a lot of the future leaders of the world are being shaped and formed. So UNESCO has been called upon to come up with a specific program to how to bring education for sustainable development into all levels of formal and non-formal education. And UNESCO has come up with a special program called ESD for 2030 that parallels the Sustainable Development Goals program around the world, and has even now come through with a reporting system for countries every 4 years to report on the progress that they are making towards education for sustainable development. So it is becoming more and more important, and more schools and school systems are looking at ways of not only teaching about it, but actually modeling sustainability in all its environmental, social, and economic justice situations all over the world.
Yes, it's nice to see all the program in all the institutions and the schools and the ages. Charles, when we will look to ESD in schools, how to be the role model as a teacher educator, and how can schools become place of change while facing limited resources? And at the last point, how do we move away from projects towards long-term establishments?
Yes, that is a huge issue for schools who are just hearing about it. So usually what schools do is that they sort of assess what are we already doing, and then how can we begin? right? First of all, people have to understand what education for sustainable development is and what it's not. I mean, we are still calling upon schools to deliver the essentials of numeracy, literacy, and so on. That is extremely important. It's not as though we're shifting away from those traditional things that we're doing in school, but we have to prepare the education system to be transformative, not only for the student themselves to be able to face change and transformation during life, but also to using our schools and education systems to address transforming our way of living and thinking it through. Not that we come up with a specific answer, but to prepare people to realize, and how do we adapt for the realization of such things as climate change, biodiversity loss, conflict amongst people, the idea of forced migration that will be coming. So this is a huge journey, and usually schools begin, they may have special days, where they celebrate diversity, or where they have an event, they'll go and plant a tree in the schoolyard and so on. Others will move from that to forming clubs around social justice or economic justice, or those kinds of programs, recycling clubs. These are sort of beginning levels. Some will move on to the point where they're teaching about sustainability in the classes. Others will go further than that, and they will actually look at their whole school program and figure out, if we are going to teach for a sustainable future, how do we build this sequentially through the years and into the system? And how do we start to actually model sustainability, model citizenship, model, and how do we practice democracy within the school? These kinds of, we call this a whole school approach. How do we look at how we operate the school? Universities and so on are looking at the building itself. They're looking at the services, food services, transportation, all of this, so that they actually try to live in this kind of manner. So that's sort of the progression that we move on. We usually start with building upon the strengths of the teachers, whether it's if someone is really good in mathematics, start thinking about, how could I bring in social, environmental, economic issues into my regular teaching in mathematics? Language arts teachers would be looking at how they could do it. But at some point, the school staff and leadership start looking at, how do we build all these random things, including field trips and speakers coming in? How do we build this into some sort of integrated program? So that's sort of the progression that most are doing.
Mm-hmm. So when we will see to other countries, how do schools in other countries, for example, India, manage to create open spaces?
Yeah, well, most countries, we have to make whatever we're doing, it has to be relevant to that particular country, right? The culture has to be taken into account. Religion often becomes a part, most religions have something to say about social justice, how we treat others. They have something to say about how we adapt to and respect the environment and so on. So culturally, it becomes different. In India, for instance, again, a huge need to be doing this without a great deal of resources. But often it is something in the more rural areas, it's more around gardening, self-sufficiency, tree planting, water conservation, and even healthcare, where medicinal herbs are being taught about in the classroom, and then the students are actually going out into the countryside in community service and so on, and teaching about the medicinal herbs that they've been talked about. But probably the greatest story that has come out of India is, I think everyone understands the ecological footprint, that is the impact our daily life has on the planet. You know, the food we eat, the importing, the clothes we wear, all of that has an impact. And being taught about this in India about 10 years ago, a little girl in grade 4 said, "But I have hands. I can do something about my footprint." And the teacher saw the power in that. And she went to a non-government organization with the concept of the ecological handprint, the antidote to the footprint. And that NGO saw the power in the thought and went to the Ministry of Environment in India. And it has become a huge program that is spread around the world. The idea, the positive aspect of the ecological handprint. So India, like most other countries around the world, are taking this on and doing the best they can with the resources they have, and depending a great deal on the ingenuity of the teachers and so on. So, yeah.
That's very nice, and I like to go there and have a look to it. Charles, the next question. How do we organize as many schools in as many countries as possible in as short a time as possible, so that ESD can be implemented so much as possible?
Yeah.
Is the variety of approaches towards ESD necessary? And if yes, why?
Well, let me go back the other way with this one. Yes, a variety of approaches really necessary, as I say, depending upon the country and what are the major issues and what can students actually do something about. And it depends upon the knowledge and skills of the teachers, the willingness, you know. So what is needed perhaps in downtown Berlin may be a little different than what is needed in some of the more rural areas, so that the students find it relevant, it's meaningful, and so on. So there are some big global ideas of social justice, economic justice, environmental justice, and so on, that goes across everything, but it comes down. But I think one of the very first things that needs to be done is what you've done already in the workshop, and that's to bring the awareness of the need forward, so that people can start thinking about it and how do they become engaged. We need teacher education institutions to take this on. That, you know, there are about 80 million teachers in the world, so trying to do all the teachers is very, very difficult. But there's a much smaller number of teacher education institutions preparing teachers and teacher training. And so if we start with them, at least the new supply of teachers will be a huge step forward. We need, though, the school systems themselves to request this, you know, and hire teachers that have this skill, that have this passion and want to do it. So you create a demand from the school systems and a supply from faculties of education. Built into that, we need in-service training, like what you've done in this workshop. And we need to look at technology, new ways of building online, not only courses, but learning circles amongst teachers and so on. So those are some of the initial steps that I think in trying to ramp up. UNESCO has come forward with a program where they are asking countries to come up with national programs. Germany was a country that already had. Surprisingly, with your state system of education, but the states all agree. This is crucial, it's necessary, and have come up with a national program. And around the world, countries are coming up with national programs on ESD to try and support this rapid expansion. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Charles. Let's have a look to the future of the 2030 agenda. What about establishing a new SDG for the next generation? Maybe SDG 18, rights to the next generation.
That would be great. You see, we do need to be thinking about this. The SDG program that we have now is the third one, and we'll probably be. We had one from 1992 to 2000. Then we had the Millennium Development Goals 2000 to 2015. Now we're halfway through the current one on the Sustainable Development Goals from 2015 to 2030. So now is the time to actually be thinking about it. We've got to stop this idea, well, it's up to the next generation. I'm sorry, our generation has messed things up, but you know, the next generation can fix it. No, all of us, you know, even someone as old as I am, we still have to be contributing and doing whatever we can. There's talk about governments having a minister of next generations or the minister of future generations. That idea of trying to get people thinking of the world they're going to leave for not only their children and their grandchildren and so on, but something that is legitimately can be put forward from the government as to what the future could very well entail. The other thing, though, along this idea of the SDG 18, the rights of the next generation, I like that. We have the rights of the child. We do have you know, the UN declarations on that, but somehow in our school systems we have to start practicing citizenship, democracy. We have to give young people the skills to become engaged and the desire to become engaged in their future. You know, half of the world's population is under 27. 27 years old is the average age in the world. So by the time most people are 27, they have not really engaged in any kind of civil or civic activity. You know, schools are not known as the most democratic place in the world. But somehow we have to start preparing people so that when they do graduate, they can take part not only in employment, but take part as a citizen, knowledgeable about what is going on. What is the big picture of what is going on in the politics of the country, and not be quite so self-serving and thinking about, okay, what's best for me today, as opposed to what is better for all, including beyond humans. What is better for all life now and coming in the future? So I love that idea of the rights to the next generation. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, when we have a look to values, reuse, and sustainable development. How can the view of our needs change positively? How can the transmission of values be carried into wider society? And for example, via media, how do we define well-being for all people, and how we can transformation processes succeed in the autocratically ruled states? So we are back in the States.
Yeah. Well, the idea of values and sort of the underlying purpose of education, it's an important part. Unfortunately, most school systems, the perception is we're to teach math and language and maybe science, because that's what gets tested, reported upon, and so on. But if you were to look at what is really the important things, you will find that what we call, I don't know how it translates into German, but the hidden curriculum, the whole thing about relationships, values, ethics, the ability to actually have meaningful conversations with other people, how to influence other people, all those things are extremely important in life. And having right now, there's a lot of talk about education not only being simply so that each individual can become all they can be, the development of the individual child, but we're looking at the importance of education as a common good for all. And underlying that is again, are values. And to be concrete, I would suggest that a great way to get started in schools is with a document called the Earth Charter. And we can find it on the internet, it's free and so on. But this was drafted by people from all countries all around the world, ordinary people, on what are the important values and ethics for living on this planet. The Earth Charter, and have students go through and find out things they disagree about, because I think you will find that they agree on just about all. But if they will then go through and say, well, how do we get there? How do we do this? And, and what is appropriate in early grades? What is more appropriate to discuss at higher grades? When we start getting into sexual orientation, gender, this is really on the minds of senior high school students. And we need to start looking at how do we talk about controversial issues with one another? How do we talk about politics? How do we discuss that and have policies around doing it? And even having people debate and then changing sides and doing the reverse. Because somehow we have to build compassion for others. We have to build the ability to relate to others. We are, with climate change, we know that the initial 1 million people that were shifted both by war and climate change and so on into parts of Europe, into Germany alone. That's just the beginning. Now they are talking about 1,000 million. In other words, 1 billion people by 2050 will have been moved around the world, either from conflict or from climate change, the inability to grow crops and so on. This is reality. And so we need to start preparing people to think about cultures and differences and relationships in a whole different way. Because if the change hits them, that is going to largely be disaster, because the people who are forced to move, it's not their fault. You know, often it is the fault of, with climate change, it is the people who are right now very, very nicely and very comfortable who are actually creating this kind of issue. Now, you mentioned about democratically ruled states. If they decide that this is a problem, they can move much more quickly. For instance, China, when they saw the problem, they built 1,000 ESD experimental schools to see how they could roll this out. Because in an autocracy, the government can say to the teachers, this is what you will do. And provide the training, provide the curriculum, and just order the change. You know, so some can move more quickly than others. Now, and we all know that if the rule comes, it doesn't necessarily, if the teacher doesn't have the knowledge, the skills, and the materials and so on, okay, you know, it doesn't really work that simply. But the thing is, in an autocracy, for the government to actually make the decision and to move forward. Because in a democracy, governments can only move, like in Germany, it can only move as far and as fast as the general public will allow it. If the change is too quick, then the population that you know will vote the government out. No one really wants change unless they can really see the benefits to them. That's why we have to change from education for the individual to education for a common good, to understand the bigger picture, and to be able to vote in a much more intelligent and longer seeing range. Okay, I'll leave it there.
So I see the necessity to be open-minded, each of us. Okay, Charles, how would describe the role of ESD today? Can ESD impact education system?
It has to. It has to. Education systems need to change as society changes. Education, it has to be more transformative. Now, at the same time, it has to, you build on this strong foundation, a strong foundation of literacy and numeracy and so on. But then you develop the skills of values, attitudes, reaction, and so on. We need to build in sort of critical thinking, the ability to question, why do we do what we do? You know, and what would be better, and how to live more with change, how to anticipate the what we want, and how to anticipate what may be coming, and how do we shift so that what comes is actually better, not only better for the individual, but is just, it's equal, and more importantly, equitable, it's sustainable and for the future in the long run. So for instance, this new approach that all countries will have to report on, they're describing aspects that should be in this transformed education system, where they identify respect for diversity, the ability to acknowledge and reflect critically on one's own values, that self-awareness, a sense of connectedness. You're not alone, but you depend upon the natural environment, you depend upon others You are interconnected, not only with people in your own world, but people around the world in one way or another. We all have impacts. And the rights of others, and the rights of other living beings, the rights of nature itself. These are big concepts that we really don't deal with, as well as giving people agency, that ability and resilience to knowledgeably become engaged, to act. Decision-making skills, collaborative skills. These are the kinds of things that are being identified as crucial, and school systems will, in the fairly near future, will be having to sort of report on how are they going to embed these sort of soft skills. How are they going to embed these into the school system? So yes, school systems, I would say the impact, hopefully the impact that results is great as the impact that really is needed. Let me leave it at that point. But the change is coming. The ability of students to actually use media, to be able to figure out what is right, what is wrong, what is fake, how to form their own opinions. This is going to be a very, very different world. The digital skills, communication skills that are needed, the conflict resolution skills. I hate to paint this in such a negative thing, but we need to be, as educators who are preparing for people to live in 2050, we need to be aware of this and do our very, very best.
I have had a last question to you. Would you have 3 recommendations for education in 2024?
Yeah, if I had 3. Well, the first one sort of is around getting started, and it's to build on your own teaching strengths. What do you really feel comfortable about? So, as I say, whether it's mathematics or history or physical education and so on, is to think about ways in which you could build in the concepts of social justice, environmental justice, economic justice, and so on into, so that you feel comfortable in getting started. And then use that as like building a snowball. You can add things to it. Even if it was simply as signing some of this as homework for in the more senior grades, for students to go out and research something that they are themselves interested in, because with the students feeding information back, you will learn and take it on as sort of as a group learning thing where you yourself are learning with the students. Be humble, let the students teach you. So that's sort of the first one. But the second would be do something. Engage, okay? Become involved, and try to engage with your fellow teachers and with administration. So you bring these random acts of people doing this and that. How do you bring this into some sort of symbiotic, concerted, strategy for the school? And the third thing is to network with other people of passion about this too, so that you don't feel like you're the only person at the school. You're the one that has to do all the recycling and you get all the extra work. But you do need to form networks. And even within your own school system, there are others like you. Like the workshop that you had, there must be people there who you linked with and felt sort of camaraderie or fellowship. and build those kinds of networks. And I hope the school system supports that kind of network, because that's how the school system itself is going to meet the targets that Germany will have to report on in the every 4 years that I was talking about. So I guess those would be three things in getting started and moving forward. And by the way, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you for a grateful interview and all the input you give. We will see what you could do in order to take some of your things and we'll integrate it in our life. Thank you very much, Charles. Have a nice day.
Thank you.